Her name was First Lieutenant Anastasia Martinenko. In Ukraine, she was a hero, one of the famed ghosts of Kyiv, a pilot who had stared death in the face and made it blink. Handpicked from hundreds of candidates to train on the F-16, she was meant to become a legend. But on this day, thousands of miles from home, her future was hanging by a single thread. She wasn't on trial for a mistake in combat, she was on trial for being right. In the sterile, cold air of a hearing room at an Arizona air base, a senior U.S. Air Force colonel stared at her, his voice devoid of emotion. "Lieutenant, let's clarify this for the record. You claim the unidentified object you engaged posed a threat. However, all our ground-based systems, our AWACS, and your wingman's own sensors identified it as a stray weather balloon. You expended a $400,000 air-to-air missile on a weather balloon, and you did so by ignoring a direct recommendation from flight control. Do we understand you correctly?" There was a heavy silence. Anastasia didn't look scared. She looked angry, a deep, burning anger that only comes from profound betrayal. She looked the colonel directly in the eye, her silence a defiant roar. Her career was over. Her dream of defending the skies of Ukraine in an F-16 was turning to ash. All because of a single decision made at 30,000 feet, where there was nothing but her aircraft, and her instincts. But what did she really see in the skies over the Arizona desert? And why was the truth about to cost her everything? This story is about courage and injustice. For me to continue finding and telling stories like this, please support the channel by hitting the like button and subscribing right now. It takes you a second, but for me, it is a great help. Thank you, and let's continue. To understand her choice, you have to understand where she came from. Anastasia wasn't just a pilot, she was the daughter of the sky. Growing up near Kyiv, her father, an aeronautical engineer, would take her to the fields to launch model airplanes. While other girls played with dolls, Anastasia learned about lift, drag, and thrust. The sky wasn't a limit, it was a destination. When the full-scale invasion began, she was one of the first in the cockpit of her aging MiG-29. She wasn't a rookie, but her experience, her 5 confirmed kills of drones and missiles, came at a cost. A memory was seared into her mind, a ghost that flew with her in every sortie. It was a frantic dogfight over the suburbs of Kyiv, the sky thick with clouds and chaos. She and her wingman, a young pilot named Lev, were trying to intercept a cruise missile. "Ground control, Sky 1, we have no visual on the target, but my sensors show clear." Lev's voice had crackled in her ear, calm and professional. The official word was that the sky was clear of enemy fighters. They were safe to hunt. But Anastasia had felt it then too, a prickling on the back of her neck, a gut feeling that their data was wrong. Before she could voice her concern, a Russian Su-35 had dropped from the clouds above them, like a hawk, a perfect ambush. An air-to-air missile screamed from its pylon. There was no time to react. Anastasia saw the flash, the explosion, the horrible spray of metal where Lev's plane had been just a second before. And then a burst of static in her ear where his voice used to be. The silence that followed was the loudest sound she had ever heard. That day, Anastasia learned a brutal lesson. Technology can lie. The most advanced sensors in the world can be fooled. But instincts, honed in the fire of real combat, are all a pilot can truly trust. Arriving at the airbase in Arizona was like stepping onto another planet. The endless, sun-baked desert was a world away from the scarred, war-torn fields of her homeland. Here, the war was a distant concept discussed in briefings, not a visceral reality of air raid sirens and funeral processions. The technology was breathtaking. The simulators, the advanced systems, and the F-16 itself, a machine she reverently called the Bird of Freedom. For her, this jet wasn't just a weapon, it was the promise of a future for her country. Her instructor, a grizzled veteran call-sign Sting, respected her raw talent. He saw the way she handled the jet, with an intuitive grace that couldn't be taught. But others, like a young, cocky American pilot named Razor, saw her as a political project, a token of support. He couldn't understand the haunted look in her eyes, the way she trained with a desperate intensity he mistook for ambition. He'd joke in the mess hall about the war stories of the Ukrainian pilots, Unable to comprehend that her stories weren't for entertainment, they were epitaphs for her friends. The training was grueling. She excelled at dogfighting, her aggressive maneuvers born from real combat experience. But she struggled with the rigid, peacetime protocols of the USAF. A week before the incident, they ran a low-level flight simulation, navigating treacherous canyons at high speed. The goal was precision, following the pre-planned route to the exact meter. Razor flew it perfectly, a flawless execution of the plan. Anastasia, however, saw a tactical shortcut, a way to crest a ridge and get a better angle on the simulated target. She completed the objective faster, but she deviated from the flight plan. Sting took her aside later. "Anastasia," he said, his voice firm but not unkind, "that was brilliant flying, but it was the wrong kind of brilliant. Out here, we fly as a team. We stick to the plan because that plan keeps everyone safe. This isn't a lone wolf fight over Kiev. Out here, instincts can get you and your wingman killed. Trust your instruments. Trust the plan." He was trying to help, but to her it sounded like he was asking her to forget the very thing that had kept her alive. By the way, I'm always fascinated to know where in the world these stories are heard. Please take a moment to write your city or country in the comments below. Let's see how far this story has traveled. Then came the day of the incident. It was a routine training flight, a 2-on-2 combat exercise over the empty expanse of the desert. Anastasia was flying with Razor as her wingman. The sky was a brilliant, endless blue. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. A ghost appeared on her radar, a tiny, intermittent blip. It wasn't moving like an aircraft. It wasn't drifting like a balloon. It was erratic, pulsing in and out of existence, a phantom on her screen. "Sting, this is Nightingale 1, she radioed to her instructor on the ground. "I have an intermittent track, bearing 290, altitude 30,000, unidentified." The reply from ground control was dismissive. "Nightingale 1, we see some atmospheric clutter on our end, probably a high-altitude weather balloon. Ignore and continue the exercise." Razor's voice crackled in her ear. "Relax, Nightingale. Probably just a glitch in your system. Wouldn't be the first time your vintage tech acts up." He was referring to her Ukrainian flight suit, a point of pride for her and a joke for him. But Anastasia's blood ran cold. The blip wasn't a glitch. It maneuvered. As they banked left, the object shadowed them, maintaining its distance perfectly. It was a subtle, deliberate turn. When they descended, it descended. It was observing them. The memory of Lev, of the clear sky that wasn't clear, screamed in her mind. "Sting, the target is maneuvering. It is pacing us. It is intelligently controlled," she insisted, her voice tight with urgency. "I am requesting permission to approach for visual identification." "Negative, Nightingale." The voice from the ground was firm, laced with annoyance now. "The object is not a threat. I repeat, it is not a threat. Your primary objective is the training exercise. Return to the exercise parameters." But Anastasia knew what she was seeing. The drone, the ghost, then made its mistake. It made another tiny, unnatural move, a flicker of acceleration as it attempted to hide in the sun's glare from her cockpit. It was the move of a predator trying to reposition, not a piece of latex drifting on the wind. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that if she let it go, it would vanish, its mission complete, its secrets recorded. She had seconds to decide. Protocol against instinct, her career against her gut, the promise to her instructor against the promise to her fallen friend. She keyed her mic to her wingman. "Razor, cover me." Before he could reply, she switched channels and banked her F-16 hard, the G-force pressing her into her seat. "I am engaging the hostile target," she broadcasted on the main channel for all to hear. "I am taking full responsibility." Anastasia's action put everything on the line. Her career, her dream, the trust of her allies. How would you describe her decision in one word? Write it in the comments. Reckless, brave, desperate? I'm really interested to see your opinions. The radio erupted in a cacophony of shouts. Sting's voice was a roar of disbelief. Razor's was a confused stammer. Anastasia ignored it all. Her world narrowed to the targeting pod display. She saw the object, a small, oddly shaped thing, shimmering in the heat. It didn't look like a balloon. It looked wrong. She locked on. "Fox 2, she whispered, a prayer and a command, and launched the missile. The Sidewinder screamed off the rail, a white spear against the blue sky. A moment later, a tiny, silent puff of smoke appeared in the distance. The ghost was gone. The return to base was silent and heavy. As she taxied her F-16 to the hangar, she saw them waiting. Not the usual ground crew. It was the base security forces. They treated her like a criminal, escorting her away from her own plane. The interrogations were long and grueling. They showed her radar playbacks, data streams, satellite imagery. All of it showed the same thing: a weather balloon drifting innocently, and then a rogue pilot launching a missile at it. Her words meant nothing against the weight of a multi-billion-dollar defense network. They suggested she was suffering from PTSD, that the pressure had finally cracked her. She was grounded indefinitely. Her access to the base was restricted. The Ukrainian command back home went silent, waiting for the official American verdict. The other pilots, even those who had been friendly, now avoided her gaze. She was utterly alone, a ghost in a different kind of war. Only Sting, her old instructor, seemed to have a sliver of doubt in his eyes. He had seen her fly. He had seen the fire in her. And he couldn't reconcile that with the woman the data said was unstable. The search for the wreckage was a formality at first. The desert is vast, and finding the tattered remains of a weather balloon was a low priority. After 3 days with nothing found, the search team was packing up. The official report was already written. The search commander, a by-the-book officer, was eager to close the file. But Sting couldn't let it go. He spent all night in the planning room, hunched over maps and charts. He looked at Anastasia's flight path, the missile's trajectory, and the official wind drift models. Something was wrong. He tracked down the search commander. "Major, you're looking in the wrong place," Sting said, his voice raspy from lack of sleep. "Your models assume it's a passive object. She said it maneuvered. Just before the hit, she said it accelerated away from the sun. That would put the debris field here," he said, pointing to a grid 5 miles south of their search area. The major scoffed. "With all due respect, sir, my models are based on Air Force data, not the feeling of a compromised pilot. We're done here." "One more flyover," Sting insisted, stepping in front of the major. "That's all I ask. That girl has seen more combat than all of your search crew combined. Her gut is a piece of military hardware you can't put a price on. Give her that respect. Give me that respect. 1 more hour." The major, seeing the fierce conviction in the veteran's eyes, finally relented with a sigh. 1 hour, Sting, then it's over." The helicopter crew, tired and skeptical, agreed to the final sweep. They flew low over the rocky terrain of the grid Sting had marked. For 50 minutes, there was nothing but sand and rock. The pilot was about to call it in. Then the co-pilot spotted something, a glint of metal wedged in a crevice. It didn't look like much, but as one of the soldiers rappelled down, he found a piece of twisted composite material. It was strangely light but incredibly strong, and underneath a scorched panel, he found a small, heat-shielded circuit board. The markings on it were not American. They were not European. They were Cyrillic. The truth had been found, and it was far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. What happened next changed everything. Before we get to the resolution, if this story has captured you, please make sure you've liked the video and subscribed to the channel. Your support is what makes these stories possible. Thank you so much. The wreckage was rushed to a secure lab at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The experts were stunned. It wasn't a weather balloon. It was a state-of-the-art passive surveillance drone, a high-tech spy designed to mimic atmospheric clutter on radar systems. It was made of advanced composite materials that absorbed radar waves, and its purpose was to fly near American fighters and secretly record their electronic signatures, the unique digital fingerprints of their radar and communication systems. The manufacturer, printed in tiny letters on the main processor, was a subsidiary of a Russian defense corporation. The scene changed. Anastasia was called back into the same hearing room. The same three officers were there, but this time they were standing. The colonel who had interrogated her now looked at her with a new expression, profound respect. "Lieutenant Martinenko," he began, his voice now filled with humility. "We owe you an apology. Your instincts did not fail. In fact, they succeeded where our technology failed. You saved us from one of the most significant intelligence breaches in the last decade. You didn't break protocol, Lieutenant. You wrote a new one." The news spread through the base like wildfire. Razor, the cocky pilot who had doubted her, found her in the mess hall. He walked up to her table, looking genuinely humbled. "Anastasia," he said, using her real name for the first time, "I was wrong. What you did, it took guts. I'm honored to fly with you." He extended his hand, and this time she took it. He finally understood. She wasn't a ghost from a past war. She was the guardian of a new one. The incident caused a quiet but massive diplomatic scandal. But more importantly, it changed everything for the Ukrainian pilot program. The U.S. command realized that they were not just training pilots, they were learning from them. They were learning that instincts forged in the crucible of a real war were a weapon no simulator could replicate. The final scene is not in a hearing room, but on the tarmac at dawn. Anastasia stands before her F-16. It gleams in the morning light. On its side, just below the cockpit, a small, hand-painted Ukrainian trident has been added. Sting walks up and stands beside her. "Ready, Anastasia?" he asks quietly. She looks at the jet, her bird of freedom. Then she looks up at the vast open sky. A small, confident smile touches her lips. "Sir," she says, "I was born ready." Sometimes, to protect your home, you first have to prove to the world that you have the right to fight for it. Anastasia Martinenko's story isn't just about a downed spy drone. It's a story about how hope has wings, and soon those wings would be returning home, to the skies of Ukraine.